The 70s brought many thrills and kills to the big and small screen. Explosions and exploitation, natural disasters, and the slasher. The 70s carved out a new landscape for the silver screen. In 1973, Elizabeth Taylor starred in her first and only horror movie, a thriller featuring Taylor's Butterfield 8 co-star Lawrence Harvey. In today's video, we are discussing 1973's Night Watch, based on the play of the same name by Lucille Fletcher. Hello and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, and media with an emphasis on old movies and nostalgic favorites. I'm Ainsley, and today I'm joined by my little French bulldog named Miss Lemon, so if you hear any snorts, little barks, or tippity taps on the floor, this is her house and I'm just living in it, apparently. So she is the star of the show. Today we are discussing Night Watch, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Lawrence Harvey, and Billy Whiteclaw. If you haven't seen this movie, I do recommend it for anybody who likes kind of a lowbrow thriller, something that it gives very 1970s TV movie with a budget type vibes. I will put in the description box below where it is available. Like previous videos, I will be discussing it in a more spoiler-free zone, giving you some spoiler-free facts of behind the scenes and some things to know in front of the scenes if you would like to know, and then we'll skip to a more spoiler-heavy discussion. Night Watch stars Elizabeth Taylor as a wealthy insomniac recovering from a nervous breakdown when she witnesses a murder in the house next door. The film stars Taylor alongside Lawrence Harvey, who appeared with her 12 years earlier in Butterfield 8. He stars as her husband John, and Billy Whiteclaw plays her visiting friend Sarah. The film was adapted from the play by Lucille Fletcher and was purchased before the first performance of the stage play. It was directed by Brian F. Hutton from a script by Tony Williamson and Evan Jones, and the film moves the setting to England, where the play took place in the United States. The cast is also condensed, so there's not as many suspects. Filming took longer than expected due to the health issues of leading cast members, Taylor and Harvey. Taylor was struggling with severe back pain and heart issues at the time, while Harvey had stomach cancer that he needed to have an operation for. It was not known at the time that he had had cancer, and that cancer would eventually kill him in November of 1973. Production was halted for 2 weeks when Billy Whitelaw's son was in the hospital. Lawrence Harvey sustained a black eye from a fight with his wife, and he was afraid that this would mean he would have to leave the production and it would be breach of contract, so he would get sued by the studio. But this was during a time when Elizabeth Taylor was having some bad health issues, and so they shut production down and he did not have to worry about it. The play from which the film is based opened on February 28th in 1972 with Joan Hackett in the leading role. The play ran for 121 performances, closing on June 10th, 1972. I have not read the play myself, though I really wish that I have. And I do want to see a performance of this maybe one day, but it would be nice to see how the differences really add up in terms of play and film. I had not watched this movie until fairly recently. I had actually came upon it when I looked up Lawrence Harvey after seeing his episode of Columbo, and I didn't realize that this film even existed. And so when I found that it was streaming for free, I decided to go and give it a watch. Though I do wish I could have seen this movie without any type of commercials, so there wasn't any type of delay, but I still enjoyed myself. It is one of those movies that's very much it is what it is. It doesn't bring a whole lot of new things to the table. I just think it's fairly enjoyable to see Elizabeth Taylor in this role, and it did come down to a surprise for me personally, though I know that might not be the case for everyone. I just think if you're somebody who likes a kind of a thriller that's a little bit more down to earth, there isn't a whole lot of characters, it's a little bit more isolated, and if you just really like Elizabeth Taylor and you want to see her in this movie. I will put in the description box below where you can watch it. During the alleged murder, we do not actually see the murder happening, though we do see the window and the chair where it supposedly happened. It happens in the midst of a storm, and so you have the shutters going back and forth and lights flashing. It is a fairly dramatic moment. We have Elizabeth Taylor, who comes from a very different time of film where things were a lot more theoretical and there wasn't a lot of subtle bits to it. There were definitely actors who were a lot more subtle at the time, as Spencer Tracy was one of them, but some of them tended to be fairly dramatic, and I feel like Taylor is one of those, and that certainly comes off here, where Lawrence Harvey definitely has this very... it's dramatic in its own right, of course, but it's very much of a different time. He really came up in the 60s more so, and it's just interesting to see kind of these different styles of acting come together. I have never seen Butterfield 8 at this particular time that I'm filming this. I do want to go and see it, but I'm interested to see how they act off of each other in that one compared to Night Watch. Elizabeth Taylor's character Ellen is also an alcoholic who is an insomniac and who's suffering from nightmares of the time she had to identify her dead husband, who was having an affair and died in a car wreck with his lover at the time. And so she's of course had to struggle with the overall stress and anxiety that can put on you, and the trust issues, and it's causing her to not be able to sleep very well, and she's drinking and she's taking medication. So a lot of this makes it difficult for not only her husband and friend to believe her, but also for the police to believe her. So then starts her calling police constantly, and she's calling them for things that she's found and she's seen. And the first suspect is the gardener who lives close to the property and who used to live in the house that her and her husband John now live in. He becomes the first suspect when he goes into the house next door and he's looking through it, and Ellen and her friend Sarah sees him. The police are called, they go in, they find him, and the next day they're digging up the place that he had planted trees to see if there was a body underneath there, and of course there wasn't. So they begin to believe that she is just essentially going crazy from the drinking and the pills, and they even mention the possibility that it could be menopause, because of course that had to be mentioned by the male police officer. That's appropriate. Eventually she finds her former husband's lighter in her desk, and it's a drawer that only she uses, and she ends up confronting her current husband John about it. And he is obviously very concerned about her, but he's starting to get very frustrated, and her friend Sarah is essentially giving her sleeping pills, tranquilizers, trying to get her to sleep, and is playing the doting friend. But we know that she's not the best person in the world. She's having an affair with a married man. She talks about him very often, and there are immediate suspicions at the beginning of this movie that the person she's actually having an affair with is John, Helen's husband. That isn't really glossed over very much, and we're left to assume that, hey, they are having an affair and they're trying to essentially gaslight her, so she ends up going away and they can go away together and have her money. He ends up even getting her to make the decision to go off and have her assets signed over to him so he can be the beneficiary. So obviously him and this so-called friend aren't really good people. We only see them kiss once, and there's another time where we see them together, but we do not see Harvey's face in it. And it's super sinister what's going on between those two, and eventually she finds out that the person that now actually owns the house across the way is her husband, because his company ended up buying it out from a couple who was living in South Africa at the time. So he essentially owns it and has the key. She takes the key from him after confronting them about their affair, saying that he is the guy that she's having an affair with, and things really go in a lot of turmoil here as she runs away and goes to the house across the way with the key, and everyone is running through it, and we're just left to wonder what's going to happen next. But things get a little
good for her
when we found out that she is actually the one to be the killer in this scenario, as she killed her husband and his lover, aka her supposed friend. She ends up killing them in the same way that she said the person across the way was killed, and she leaves them in the same position. When she goes back home, we see that she's not exactly as out of her mind as she had led everyone to believe. She seems to be pretty together. She gets dressed up, packs a bag, and then we hear some old clappity claps coming through the hallway, and it is the gardener. He knows exactly what's happened, and he doesn't exactly blackmail her. He just says he's not going to tell the police because they wouldn't believe him either, and he ends up staying there and taking care of everything for her when she decides to go off. So we get a nice little kind of bow tied up there at the end. She's in kind of cahoots with the gardener who's not going to tell the police what happened. And one of the things I really like about this is there's a part where she calls the police. They just end up hanging up on her, and that was exactly what she wanted to happen. She thought through every possible scenario, and the reason she got the police involved was because, I mean, she tried to get a hold of them. They can't say that she didn't. My whole entire thought on this movie is that it of course was nothing very special. It didn't bring anything new to the table even at its time in 1973, but it was definitely a fun and interesting ride, particularly with the performance by Elizabeth Taylor and the chemistry that she has with Lawrence Harvey. I have some reviews and articles that I will put in the description box below, but there was one review in particular that I believe was from the New York Times, and I didn't find this specific thing said in the article itself, but I did see it when you look it up on Google, you know, those little parts that tells you what's going to be in there. And somebody basically said, why would you not choose, I don't know the exact words, but like the luscious Elizabeth Taylor over the plain Billy Whitelaw? And that is just beyond disrespectful. You're talking about the actors here, you're not talking about characters, and it's just specifically commenting on the way that they look. And we all know when somebody ends up cheating on somebody and everything that was going on here, it's more so about the power that one can have or the control that someone can have. And obviously this Sarah character is a very insecure person. She's quite snobbish and not great, but she's obviously insecure. She's sleeping with other people's husbands, and she's sleeping with her friend's husband. So that's probably why he wanted to be with her, because she was insecure and he could control the situation more, and he had somebody in his life who had a lot more power than he did. She was a wealthy widow from her first husband, and I mean, she was just beautiful and powerful, and he didn't want that. He didn't like that. There are definitely components of this movie that is very much in the lane of Gaslight and other ones, and in this we definitely get the initial view that the husband and the friend are probably involved in this and doing some gaslighting, but it turns out things are flipped on their head and she is the one that is doing all the pretending here, and I personally like that. I'm also really into that kind of 1970s vibes and the atmosphere and tone of the 1970s and just the general way that it looked, and that is something that really comes into play of my own personal enjoyment of Night Watch. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch or listen to this video. I really do appreciate it. I have a plan for next week to tell you about the film The Spiral Staircase. If you want to see more videos from me where I talk about films and Hollywood and all of that jazz, please subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, hit like and comment below if you've seen this movie or your thoughts on it, or make some suggestions and requests of things that you would like to see on the channel. Links are in the description box below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!